by subscribing and leaving comments.
It's been noted that more than 50% of Michigan land is forest. A good portion of that's rarely been seen by humans. There's been incidents where men have ventured into these unexplored areas but have never returned. Is it possible, then, that there are perhaps undiscovered, untouched areas where wildlife has been driven by civilization into hiding? Wildlife perhaps thought never to have even existed at all in our state. If we can agree on that consensus, then such open-mindedness should also leave open the possibilities of a creature who's adapted to Michigan's vast wilderness, a creature whose habits and physical stature has adapted well in the swamps and unexplored areas of Michigan. Such a creature is believed to have been sighted in our state many times. It's been referred to as Bigfoot. This human-like creature has been aptly named because of the huge footprints it supposedly leaves behind. It's an elusive and apparent shy creature. Art Kapa of Mayville, Michigan, has been intrigued by just such a creature in Michigan. He's been investigating sightings and reports of sightings for many years now. We're in Tuscola County at the home of Art Kapa, and Art is an investigative researcher, you'd say, freelance, into the subject of Sasquatch or Bigfoot. And the unique thing about this is that he is investigating alleged sightings in the Michigan area. First of all, could you tell us what we're saying when we say Bigfoot or Sasquatch? What type of a creature are we saying, or are we describing?
That's a catch-22 situation. That's a hard one to answer. A lot of people say it possibly could be the creature called Gigantopithecus that ranged somewhere back 10, 20, 30,000 years ago, which was, the scientific community says it's possibly half ape and half man, but more man-like, for the simple fact is it walks quite easily on two legs. The body proportionally is built similar to a human, except it's covered with hair. The footprint, as you can see, is similar to the human foot, only that it's larger. Well, the simple fact is we're looking at one huge creature, the range of possibly 400 to 800 pounds, depending on the height. The height most generally reported to me and throughout the rest of the country through well-known Bigfoot researchers are approximately 8 foot tall. Now, 8 foot, you're looking from the floor approximately to the ceiling.
Now, you've been accumulating and doing research for the past 20 years now.
Yeah.
What got you interested in the subject? Did you have a reporting yourself, or?
No, what got me interested was back in the 50s when I was stationed in the military. That's when the first well-publicized incidents of footprints being found in Northern California. And the machinery, not quite machinery, but like a 55-gallon drum of fuel oil, literally carried, not rolled, carried, and a set of footprints, tremendous size footprints, 18, 19 inches in length, carried whatever it was that carried it, thrown the fuel oil drum over into a gully off the roadbed. Another incident in that same area, same period of time, where the trailer load full of culverts were overturned. Now, what human could do or have this type of strength? And every morning when the road construction crew would come back, there would be literally hundreds of footprints being soft earth as the road graders and bulldozers were working up the ground. There'd be literally hundreds of footprints ranging in size from 17, 18 to 19 inches.
Any actual sightings in that area of as far as in that site?
In that period of time, no. Immediately after that, the years after that, there was considerable sightings in Northern California, of course, Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia. It's a hard subject to get into. Of course, Northern California and on that whole region there, you're looking at tremendous amount of wilderness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And people, they tend to build their homes on the very edge of the wilderness, along the highways, country roads. Nobody builds back in.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a hermit here or there.
Mm-hmm.
But we're looking at millions and millions of wilderness back in just Northern California. It boggles your mind. There's a few pictures up there on the wall of the film site itself. Now, you get up on top of the mountain and you don't see nothing but mountain after mountain after mountain. Anything could survive in there.
Mm-hmm. How about the Michigan area? Is there that much wilderness that something like that could be drawn to this area?
Oh, sure. Have you ever been up in an airplane and looked down on Michigan? You should try it sometimes. Now, Michigan is approximately 58,000 square miles, give or take a few.
Mm-hmm.
2/3 of Michigan is woods. Now, the farther north you go, the more wilderness, per se, you're going to run into, because there's less farming going on. And you get all these national forest, state forest, federal forest, private lands, they all intermingle. You got one solid mass of forest land. Now, anything, absolutely anything, could be wandering around in that portion, the northern portion, the southern portion. We've got a lot of woods right here in the southern portion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And deer hunters. Now, a lot of people ask me, well, how come deer hunters don't? We've got 400,000 or 500,000 deer hunters that hunt in the state of Michigan. Nobody hunts hand in hand. So there's a lot of space in between hunters. Now, there's very few hunters that will venture more than approximately a quarter mile off of any given roadway or logging road, for the simple fact is a lot of guys that get lost. And who wants to drag a deer or carry a deer any more than they have to? So again, we're getting to what's in the center of the woods.
Mm-hmm. Now, how early or how late has it been that the first reportings of Michigan came about?
The earliest reporting, to my knowledge, that I can prove happened back in the 40s. Now, there may have been other, Saginaw, up along the river. That went back, I think it was 39 or 38, up along the river. And that was documented, so to speak, in the newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's probably more that took place probably around the turn of the century, but man, it's time-consuming to go through old newspapers, libraries, to try to dig up the very first sighting, which I don't have the time. I just soon spend my time in a forest looking for the creature, hoping to prove that it does exist, rather than spend my time in dusty old libraries looking for documented proof, so to speak.
Plastic distance. Now, you were telling me that you were pretty much hot on the trail after reporting, not too far, not long ago.
That would have been in 85, right here in northern Tuscola County.
Could you describe what happened that day? How it came about that a sighting was
Well, 8
reported
o'clock in the morning, I received a call from a very excited gentleman, a farmer there up in the Fish Point area. What he described to me over the phone, known to me, would have been the Bigfoot. But he described an ape-like creature, but it looked man-like. It had walked out of some heavy brush onto his bean field, approximately 300 yards behind his house, and it stood there, he said, approximately 2 or 3 minutes. Him and his wife also seen it. So when I got there within 20 minutes, and we talked briefly. He pointed to where the creature stood, and I grabbed my gear, backpack, plaster pairs, cameras, and all that. And I come upon tracks. Well, I dropped my backpack, knowing that I was close.
Mm-hmm.
And it was quite muddy. And it was a miserable day. It was partly snow showers, partly drizzle with high winds. And I took the track, approximately 400 yards, and I came upon a second set of tracks that joined the first one. These were the tracks right here out of Tuscola County.
Those are the tracks, okay.
And I continued following. We come on to a fairly large patch of wood, probably approximately maybe 5-10 acres. And I thought for sure that they may have been laying up in the woods, being broad daylight. We're looking at late morning now, approximately 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. And I was hoping they'd be in the woods. Now, my adrenaline was up high. I don't think my feet even touched the ground, even though I had mud clear up to my crotch, because it was pretty muddy out there. So I snuck through the woods the best I could. Of course, you could see a long ways in the woods that time of the year because the foliage, there's no foliage up. And the camera ready, but unfortunately they had gone right through the woods, across another field, across a partially plowed field, through a small, heavy, narrow strip of woods. They crossed through that, crossed over a road. They got back into the Fish Point area, which I couldn't get into because the ditches were just chock full of water.
We have a map here right beside us. Art, could you explain what this is? This actual sightings that have been
These are
reported
all
to you?
sightings that took place probably the past close to 20 years. I don't have all of the sightings pinned in here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And each, I've been starting to put the year on them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the coloration is different. See, you get the yellow-colored one, that's track find only.
Mm-hmm.
The black ones are more than one scene, like a family group. This is 3 seen were here, 3 seen were here at the same time. The red means only one sighting, but no tracks were found.
Mm-hmm. Have you actually visited these sites yourself?
Oh,
or
yes.
Every one of these?
Whenever there's a sighting and people contact me, hopefully they can contact me immediately, because I can leave the house within 15 minutes. My van is loaded with everything I need, plaster, except my cameras, which I kept in the house. But there's everything in my van, plaster, Paris, tapes, whatever I need, the backpack, a sleeping bag, everything. And if I can get into the area immediately upon a sighting, and with me sneaking around and pussyfooting around, hoping that maybe I can come nose to nose with this creature, that's what this whole thing is about, is to see it and capture it on film.
Mm-hmm.
And all the reports that are told to me is this thing looks human. It walks like a human being. But what is it? I'm not saying there is such a creature, but I'm not saying there isn't.
Mm-hmm.
But what is here? What are people saying?
They are seeing something.
Are they all drunk?
Mm-hmm.
Are they all liars? Is everybody walking around with their pocket full of wacky weed?
Mm-hmm.
What are they seeing? We're looking at honest people.
And we're looking at a very undiscovered or
Unknown?
uninhabited part of the state where
Sure.
we're seeing a lot of wilderness. People don't realize that there's much.
There's a lot of wilderness right here in the state of Michigan, right in the farm belt right here. There's a lot of woods, an awful lot of woods. So who's making the footprints? Let's take 2/3 of these and throw them outside.
Mm-hmm.
What about the other third? How are we going to explain them away?
Mm-hmm.
Is this a nationwide hoax, elaborate hoax? For what purpose? Who's gaining what? There's no money being made on this.
Mm-hmm.
People that relate to me their experience of having a sighting, all they're going to get in return is ridicule. They're not going to get any money. The newspapers aren't going to flock to them and say, "Here, here's $100. Give me your story." It don't work that way. It's ridicule.
Mm-hmm.
So who's going to fabricate a story to be ridiculed?
We're here in East Lansing, Michigan, and we are here on the campus of Michigan State University. We are here at the museum. And Barry, we're going to find out more about this here Bigfoot. Is it a myth or is it fact? We're going to be talking with Professor Kenneth Wylie, who was commissioned to write the book Bigfoot, a personal inquiry into phenomena, published by the Viking Press, available at most libraries. This is a serious study of a paranormal subject casting severe doubt on the existence of the Bigfoot. So we're here today to find out if this is a myth or if it's fact. Ken, could you tell us something about this, how you come about writing this, or was commissioned to write this book on Bigfoot?
Well, actually, it goes back to 1978, 79, when my publisher in New York at the time, Viking Press, who published this book, called me and asked me if I had heard about this, because there had been several sightings in northern Michigan, where at the time I was living year-round in Leelanau County. And it just happened, of course, that I had read in the paper. And like anyone interested in the outdoors and natural phenomenon, I'd been fascinated by this since I was a youngster. And I had heard stories about the Yeti, the abominable snowman.
Yeah.
And I'd heard stories about the Bigfoot, or Sasquatch, as it's sometimes called in the Pacific Northwest. And I had, like many people, a big question mark about this. I was somewhat dubious, but also fascinated. And at first I was not too interested in the idea because I felt that it was largely a mythological phenomenon. And I finally, after some discussion and an agreement which involved funds which provided for travel to the haunts of Bigfoot, and which incidentally are among the most beautiful places on earth. I mean, the Pacific Northwest, but also our own Midwestern areas. I said, yes, I think I would like to do this. I said, upon one condition, that as a historian and with some training and background in anthropology, that I would write chapters dealing with the biology of the critter. That is it conceivable that biologically you could have such a beast, or whatever, humanoid or not? In other words, could such a living being have evolved and would be present on Earth in this environment? A chapter on its mythology, that is are there patterns of mythology? And chapters on history and the previous sightings in other parts of the world, and that I would do an in-depth analysis. I wouldn't just write a potboiler that the critter lurks in the woods, waiting for children to come. Yeah, and they agreed to this, and so I proceeded, and it was one of the most enjoyable and enlightening experiences I've ever had. It was great fun to write, and fun to read. I mean, excuse me, I hope it's fun to read.
A lot of people
research.
Found it very interesting. A lot of people out there that really believe in this Bigfoot have found it most fascinating. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Ken. Go right ahead. Yeah,
well, that was the basic outline of my how I came to it. I began then to research by using the library here at MSU and other libraries in the state, reading up on the subject. And there are many, many scores of books written on this subject. Most of them not a great deal of value, some very good. One or two scientists had written on this, and I corresponded with some of them. And I began a correspondence with the curator of the mammalogy department at the Museum of Natural History in New York City, who happened to be a friend of mine because of another project. And I found that he was, though extremely skeptical, and remains so, he was an aficionado, like somebody who follows the bullfights or something. He followed Bigfoot and all of the stories, and with skepticism, but with great interest. And he had a great deal of information, and he gave me names as well. And as a consequence of this, I was able to come up with a list of the top Bigfoot experts or hunters or those who would make a living of hunting for Bigfoot, and or who some of them make a living doing that. Some do it anyway. That is, to make a living in other ways.
Selling shirts or all kinds of articles.
And I traced some of these people down, managed to interview them in person, in some cases near the places where they had either seen or were searching for Bigfoot. I used the singular, although obviously if the creature existed it would have to be in the plural. There would have to be more than one. But we all say Bigfoot, I think, just as we say Sasquatch, as if there's but one.
Yeah.
And I trekked around with my backpack and a rental car and went off into some of the areas where the critter is supposed to be. And I have to admit that some of those are very magnificent and wild, woolly country. Up in the Olympic Range, in the Olympic National Forest, National Park, across from Seattle, on the Olympic Peninsula in Washington State, places like that, where one could imagine such a creature existing because of the tremendous vegetation. And I was puzzled by this and fascinated. I remained, however, skeptical, I think, throughout the search. Like most people, I think, who look at these things from a rational perspective, I wanted to know, was there evidence?
Well, I just get ready to ask you that question. Is there any skeletal remains that anybody has found or anything of this nature?
Well, there have been several alleged remains. The most famous is the Minnesota Iceman, which was a partially decomposed corpse of a humanoid-looking creature found in a block of ice, allegedly off the Kamchuk Peninsula in Siberia, but later the man who had this in a sideshow in Minnesota, and was showing it in a sideshow, frozen in a block of ice, said that he had frozen it, and there were claims that it had been shot in Minnesota. And they had all kinds of fun with this, investigated by the FBI. When the Smithsonian Institution actually began to investigate, to send out a team to check this out, after a couple of scientists named Ivan Sanderson and Bernard Heuvelmans I think from Brussels, in Belgium, had gone to look at this creature through the ice, not actually investigating it, but just looking at it through the ice. The Smithsonian was going to send a team to actually investigate it, whereupon the owner, a man named Hansen, said, "Oh, I can't let that happen." So he had a reproduction made, which he then said was not the original, and he said he destroyed the original. Consequently, no one believes it really was anything but a fake.
Right.
And I'm sorry to say that has happened with most cases of so-called physical evidence. There are no skeletal remains, and there are no bodily remains that we know of anywhere and literally anywhere. Even in the Himalaya, the Yeti, which is supposed to be the Asian counterpart of Bigfoot, or some believe, there have been no confirmed finds of bones, hair, body parts.
What about the footprints? I mean, I've seen cast of footprints of this Bigfoot. How could they come up or contrive such a
Well, I like to
thing?
believe.
I've seen the cast.
I've seen casts too. I'd like to believe, and I think most of us were, and it's natural, I think, for human beings to believe that something so magnificent and mysterious could survive and would be there. And of course there is that remote possibility. Some of the footprint sightings have been tantalizingly exciting in places where one would expect such a creature to exist, and seen by people whose accounts hold together. And I investigated some of these where the account of the person who just found the tracks, not having seen anything but having found tracks, would describe them in ways that chilled you. You realize that this description was not made up. This was an outdoorsman, a woodsman, a person who knew the country, saying, I don't know how these could have been put down without a large animal walking with a huge stride, and sometimes with a great deal of weight and similarity to the kind of push-off, toe-off that humans have, or that an animal with a long plantigrade foot, that is a foot that sits flat on the ground, would walk. Unfortunately, when I tried to track down those specific cases, as I said in the book, the closer I tried to get to the creature, the further and more elusively he retreated. The further he retreated. And same thing happened with the footprints. I couldn't find direct evidence to support those footprints. In other words, anyone can lay down fake tracks. And there is a theory going around among many of the Bigfoot people, many of whom I respect greatly, that it would take a hoax of mafia-like proportions in order to get so many people to fake tracks that are similar. It wouldn't. Most Americans are literate. There have been many thousands of hours of TV shows about this.
Oh, yes.
Or hundreds anyway. And there have been movies made. And most people who can read and write and read a newspaper can get the general outline of what these footprints supposedly look like and fake them. And that, unfortunately, since a human being is, we are large human beings who could strap on a pair of wooden feet or rubber feet and walk around the woods, and it would fool most people. Unfortunately, I think much of it is a hoax. We may have some mistaken identity cases. If you've seen bear tracks in the woods, you know that they're not common, but they can be mistaken for human tracks.
Well, and I've seen look like real footprints, and they were cast, they were plaster Paris, and they were probably 17 inches long or so. But and there's been sightings, at least we've heard all over the state of Michigan, little spots here and there. So what you're saying then, Kenneth, is that the possibility of this Bigfoot phenomena is still probably
very remote, I think. Let me explain why. From the point of view of the scientists, and I can't claim to be a scientist in the hard sciences, such as in, say, zoology, but I have interviewed many. And I know the methodologies they use, and they're not unlike those that historians and anthropologists use, which I am. That is, the question is the testability of evidence. If you can't test evidence because it doesn't exist, then you have nothing. But you have nothing.
Zero.
And as long as we don't have any evidence to test, then we can only speculate. I will say this, that I think the likelihood of such a creature existing in Michigan or in the Midwest with our enormous populations, despite the thousands of acres, hundreds of thousands of wilderness, in which I'm an outdoorsman myself. I spend a lot of time canoeing and hiking in the West, and in our own mountains, and in eastern forests and so on. And I think it's extremely unlikely that outdoorsmen, some of whom have far more experience than myself, of 40 or 50 years, would not have seen, not have known, not have experienced this. And some of them believe that such a creature could exist. It seems to me the only likelihood would be if such a creature could have survived the decline of other great animals at the end of the Pleistocene, would be in the Pacific Northwest at best, or more likely in Asia, not in the Michigan forests. For one thing, such a creature would have to hibernate, I think, because it's so large. Our bears hibernate for good reason, or they semi-hibernate. Biologists have told me this, and that they can't survive on what's available to them in the winter woods without going into their long sleep, and they live off the fat. because they are so large, because they need such a large intake of food. And so they wait until spring, come out. And I have heard no one say that a Sasquatch or Bigfoot would have that capacity, which is apparently not known to primates,
Well,
to hibernate.
there you are.
So there I am.
There you are. If there is one out there, why, we'd sure like to know about it. Just drop us a line here at Michigan Magazine, P.O. Box 503, Rose City, Michigan. And the information will certainly get to Professor Wylie here. And Ken, it is always a pleasure to talk to you.
Del, it's good to talk to you.
And thanks so much for being on Michigan Magazine.
Thank you.
If you're enjoying all this rare and unique content, please show your support by subscribing and leaving comments.